Hello. Today we get to begin with a very fun technique, and I'm sure it is one you have heard of. I have in my hands a stone, a simple, polished, tumbled stone. Maybe it's quartz, maybe it's marble. Just a smooth, tumbled stone that is very pleasing to the touch. And this can be a worry stone. For many, many years, people have carried worry stones in their pocket. And whenever they are worried or get nervous, they reach in their pocket and they feel that smooth surface and the tactile sensations ground them in the present moment. It's a way to bring themselves to the real world through invoking the senses, this time the sense of touch. Now you know so many good anxiety relief techniques that you might even build an association in your mind between your worry stone and your favorite technique, so that when you reach in your pocket and touch your worry stone, it triggers your favorite coping skill. It's a reminder, a physical reminder of beginning to engage in your favorite anxiety relief technique. So consider getting a worry stone. It doesn't have to be a stone, obviously. Many, many lovely objects can function as worry stones. As a matter of fact, because people love to invent things, people have now invented sort of improvements on the worry stone, and they're called fidget toys or therapy toys. There are a number of different kinds on the market, but they involve different types of movable plastic toys that often have varying textures and that can be twisted into different shapes. One of the nice things about fidget toys or therapy toys is that it involves both hands, so you get bilateral stimulation of the brain. Another very nice thing about these fidget toys is they're fun. They're interesting and they're fun. So you may want to investigate getting yourself a fidget toy. To build on that, we're going to go back to one of the very oldest techniques. And this technique has some advantages even over fidget toys. And it's just handcrafts, knitting, crochet, needlepoint, embroidery. And this works for men and for women. There are a lot of men who do knitting and crocheting. There are a lot of women who do knitting and crocheting. If you find yourself in what might be a stressful or anxiety-provoking situation, and you happen to be seated, you can pick up your handwork and begin to do it. One of the very nice things about doing handwork is that besides involving both hands, it has a repetitious motion, motions that you repeat over and over, and it becomes its own meditation in motion. This is highly effective. And another benefit of handwork is that if you're in a social setting and you have a touch of social anxiety, you can bring out your handcraft and start working on it, and it is considered perfectly polite and socially acceptable to be looking down at it rather than constantly making eye contact with every person in the group. Because while you're working, you're crocheting, or you're knitting, you're still listening, you're still talking, you're actively engaged in the conversation, but you're able to do it without making constant eye contact with all the people in the group. And there's one other big benefit of handcrafts, and that is that at the end of your project, you have produced something beautiful. At the end of playing with a fidgeting toy, you haven't produced anything wonderful. But at the end of a handcraft project, you have used your own anxious energy to turn it into something wonderful. You have created something. Let your anxious energy work for you. Put it to work. I really recommend handcrafts. It has worked for people for centuries. Absolutely, give that one a try. Now, we're going to talk about a very important topic, and it's called anticipatory anxiety. And I'm sure you know what this is. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's when we anticipate something in the future and we're already anxious about it. We haven't even gotten to the event yet, but we're building up anxiety, looking forward to the future event. So not only do we think the future event will be negative or anxiety producing, but we're adding anxiety to our lives today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day by worrying about that event in the future. We do not need to be doing this. We do not need to be borrowing trouble from tomorrow to add to today. So here's the technique for working on anticipation. Because I'll tell you something. In real life, the real event is never as bad as the anticipatory anxiety leading up to it. Our imaginations are so powerful that we blow things out of proportion all the time. We look forward to that event, we exaggerate it in our minds, we enlarge it in our minds, we make it super threatening in our minds. The imagination is very, very powerful. So we're going to use it for us. We're going to use our imaginations for our own purposes. The technique is to take your imagination and shrink the event. The technique is called shrinking. Take those things that you have built up in your mind to be larger than life and shrink them down to real life size. If it pleases you, you can shrink them down even smaller than that. Think of the people that might be involved at the future event. Perhaps they are people with whom you do not get along. Those people tend to loom larger than life in our imaginations. So think of them and shrink them. Shrink those people down to their normal, ordinary sizes. If you like, shrink them down even further than that. Shrink them down to 1 inch high. They're not very threatening there. Shrinking. Shrink all those scary, threatening things down smaller and smaller and smaller. Because you must counteract the tendency for your imagination to run away with you. Anxiety is all about having our imaginations run away with us and building enormous, scary, frightening things that only exist in our imagination. So we do the opposite. Rather than letting things loom way out of proportion in our mind, we shrink them. We shrink them smaller and smaller and smaller. And we do it repeatedly. Remember, with each of these techniques, we do it over and over and over and over, because that's where the success comes from. So that it becomes our automatic response when we feel our imagination running away with us, to put the brakes on it. Shrink everything back down to normal size. Have you noticed how often in your life you have actually gotten to the stressful event or met with the stressful person, and even as you were there you thought, oh, this is much more insignificant than I thought it was going to be. This event is much easier to get through than I thought it was going to be. I can't believe I worried for nothing. I spent all that time and energy worrying for nothing. So let go of worry, shrink, 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 shrink things back down very small to their non-threatening real life size. The next technique that we get to discuss is very closely related to shrinking, and it is called the bird's eye view. Imagine for a moment that you are a bird flying outdoors on a beautiful sunlit day. You're floating on the breeze. The wind ruffles your feathers. The sun is shining. You're a very happy bird. And you look down at the people below you. And you say, ah, look at all the human beings down there, very small, very far away. All those human beings doing their human being things, going here, going there, interacting. How interesting. The bird is the observer. And as the bird, you look down and you see someone you recognize. You see yourself. And you say, ah, there I am, down on the earth, doing my human being things, interacting with other people. You as the bird are the witness. You cannot even feel or know about the emotions that are going on down below. You're simply able to observe that there are a lot of people, and they go here and there, and they're engaged in their human being activities, none of which are terrifically consequential or important. And this is a method by which you gain perspective on your life. When you are the bird, simply observing you from a distance, you gain perspective, and things become natural. There's nothing to worry about. All of the things that you're engaged in are normal, everyday human being activities, just like all the other human beings doing their things. And you get perspective on your life by observing it from the bird's eye view. So take time often and be the bird gazing down at the planet with its bird's eye view, and gain perspective on yourself, your life, your activities. Give yourself some distance and observe. You can observe it without having to do anything. Just quietly observe from a distance. That's the bird's eye view. And now we come to the last technique in the course. I have enjoyed the course very much. And to lead into the last technique, I want to tell a joke that my dad always used to tell. A fella goes to the pizza parlor and he orders a large pizza. And the pizza guy says, "Do you want me to cut that in 6 or in 8? And the customer says, "Oh, cut it in 6. I can't eat 8. You may have noticed that this video course is divided into 6 videos plus 2 bonus videos rather than 8. And the reason is because to us it seems easier to get through 6 videos and 2 bonus videos than to sit through a course of 8 videos. So the technique is called reframing. The course was reframed from being 8 videos to being 6, which sounds easier, plus 2 special bonus videos. Reframing puts a different aspect, a new interpretation on whatever the item is. You can reframe many, many things in your life to make them more acceptable to you, more pleasant for you, more meaningful for you. Take, for example, an interaction you might have with another person that turns into a very angry argument. And later you think, why were they so angry? I was being perfectly reasonable, but they really were angry. I don't know why, and I'm upset about that. Reframe that conversation. Perhaps that person was having a really bad day. Perhaps that person was worried about a family member who was ill. Perhaps that person is very ill themselves, and we just don't know it. There are a lot of reasons why they might have been very angry, and we know in any interaction like that, it's more about them than it is about us. So reframe the conversation, and the whole thing then becomes acceptable. It might even allow you to open your heart in compassion to that person. Another very famous reframing that people are talking about now because it is in the news from various studies that have been done is reframing anxiety as excitement, especially anticipatory anxiety when there's an event in the future that perhaps you have been worried about and you feel jittery. If you reframe your anxious energy as excitement, you can change the interpretation of the entire event. You reframe it to something that works for you and that in fact makes more sense, is more reasonable, is more in tune with the real world. Reframing anxiety as excitement. There's one other reframing that I want to mention as an example, because perhaps we are all guilty of it. And that reframing is about our own lives and our own accomplishments. You may be looking back at your life and thinking, why haven't I done this? Why haven't I accomplished that? Reframe it. Look at all the things you have done. Look at all of the things you have accomplished. Look at all the people you have affected in a positive way. Look at all the skills you have learned, the knowledge you have gained. Reframe your life in the positive, because you have done a lot, so much more than you give yourself credit for. Reframe your life. And now we come to the end of the course. I want to publicly thank all of the wise people who have gone before me, who found and perfected many of the techniques that we have talked about. I want to thank all the people with real-life anxiety who found and perfected many of the techniques that we have talked about. But mostly I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the journey. I know it will prove fruitful for you. I'm grateful to you. All good thoughts to you.